The silence on the Iron Mule was never truly silent. That was the first thing you learned when you flew a ship that was older than most colonized planets. There was always a groan, a shudder, a rhythmic thump hiss of the atmospheric recyclers trying to scrub the smell of ozone and burnt oil from the air. To me, those sounds were a lullaby. To the creature sitting across from me in the mess hall, they sounded like the belly of a beast waiting to digest her. I stared at the black coffee in my mug. It was thick, sludge-like, and probably capable of stripping paint off a bulkhead, just the way I liked it. I took a slow sip, letting the heat burn my throat before shifting my gaze to her. I decided to call her Elara. She hadn't given me a name yet. In fact, she hadn't spoken a single word since I dragged her off the loading dock of Station 42 3 hours ago. Elara was huddled in the corner of the mess hall, squeezed between a locker and the cold metal wall as if she were trying to merge with the steel. Her knees were pulled up tight against her chest, her arms wrapped around her shins in a protective knot. Her skin was a pale iridescent blue, the color of glacial ice under a winter moon, but it was marred by grime, grease, and the dark, ugly bruises left by slavers' chains. But it was her ears that gave her away. They were long, tapering to elegant points that extended past her skull, twitching independently at every creak of the ship. Highborn biology. She wasn't built for labor. She wasn't built for the mines. She was built for diplomacy, for art, for soft lights and softer words. And now she was sitting in a flying brick piloted by a human in battered armor, waiting to die. "It's not poisoned," I said, my voice cutting through the hum of the engine. She flinched. It was a violent whole-body jerk like I had whipped her. Her golden eyes snapped open wide and terrified, fixing on me. I pushed the plate of heated rations across the scratched metal table. Protein block synthetic nutrient paste, and a little bit of preserved peach if you can believe I found that out here. I tapped the plate with a spoon. "Eat. Your body is shaking because your blood sugar is crashing. You can't survive on fear." Elara didn't move toward the food. She didn't look at it. She only looked at my hands. Specifically, she looked at the heavy, calloused hands that were currently resting on the table, nowhere near my sidearm. She was calculating. I could see the gears turning behind those terrified golden eyes. She was trying to figure out the transaction. In the lawless zones, everything was a transaction. "You feed me, I do what? You saved me, so what do I owe?" I sighed, a heavy sound that seemed to rattle the orange stripe painted across the chest of my armor. I leaned back, the chair groaning under my weight. "Stop doing the math, kid," I said softly. "The math doesn't work here." I looked away from her, staring at the scuffed reflection of my own face in the dark viewport. I looked old. The scar running down my left cheek was white against the gray stubble. My eyes were tired, but they were the eyes of a man who slept at night. "I know what you're replaying in your head," I said, addressing the reflection but speaking to her. "You're thinking about the dock. You're thinking about the rifle." At the mention of the rifle, a small whimpering sound escaped her throat. I closed my eyes and the memory of 3 hours ago washed over me. It was vivid, sharp, and smelling of sulfur. The loading dock of Station 42 was a pit. It was where the galaxy flushed its waste. It smelled of unwashed bodies, rotting cargo, and the distinct metallic tang of despair. I had been walking back to the Iron Mule with a replacement fusion coil over my shoulder, minding my own business. That's the rule. Walk fast, look mean, don't stop. Then I saw them. 3 Varaxians, lizard-like brutes with scales the color of dried blood and breath that smelled like carrion. They were laughing, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated in your chest. They were clustered around a heavy cargo sled. Chained to the sled, wrists bound in heavy iron suppression cuffs, was Elara. She looked small, fragile. The Varaxians were taking bets on her durability. One of them, a scarred brute with a missing eye, poked her with an electric prod. She didn't scream. She just shuddered, biting her lip until purple blood ran down her chin. I should have kept walking. I really should have. I'm 45 years old. I have a bad back, a ship that needs constant repairs, and a bank account that is almost always empty. I don't need trouble. But then she looked up. She didn't look at the lizards. She looked past them. She looked at me. And in that split second, I saw something that stopped me dead in my tracks. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't begging. It was resignation. It was the look of a soul that has accepted its end. She was looking at my human face, my armor, and she didn't see a savior. She just saw another witness to her destruction. I stopped. I set the fusion coil down gently on the deck. I walked over to the group. My boots, Heavy, magnetic-soled combat boots clanged rhythmically on the deck plating. Clang, clang, clang. The Varaxians turned. The leader towered over me, 7 feet of muscle and scales. "Lost little human," he hissed. "Or do you want to buy? This one is weak, but she has pretty parts." I looked at Elara. She was trembling so hard the chains rattled. "She's not for sale," I said. My voice was calm. It's the voice I used to use when I was a sergeant, instructing rookies on how to defuse a plasma mine. "She's coming with me." The leader laughed. He spat on the ground near my boot. "And why would I give my property to a gray-haired ape?" "Because," I said, reaching behind my back and unlimbering the kinetic rifle I always carried. "Today is a bad day to argue with me." The atmosphere on the dock changed instantly. The laughter stopped. The Varaxians went still, their hands drifting toward their blasters. I leveled the rifle. It was an old-school slug thrower. No energy beams, no polite warning hum, just a barrel the size of a fist that threw metal loud and fast. I aimed it right at Elara. That was the moment that broke her. She saw the human raise his weapon. She saw the barrel pointed in her direction. She didn't know I was aiming at the locking mechanism of the chains above her head. She just thought, finally, it's over. She shut her eyes. She squeezed them tight, tears leaking out, and lowered her head to accept the bullet. She braced herself for the impact that would end her pain. Boom. The sound was deafening. The recoil slammed into my shoulder. Elara screamed, a high, thin sound of terror. She flinched, curling into a ball, waiting for the darkness. But the darkness didn't come. Instead, the heavy iron chain shattered. The locking pin, obliterated by a high-velocity tungsten round, exploded into shrapnel. The cuffs fell from her wrists with a heavy clatter. She froze. She slowly opened one eye, then the other. She looked at her free hands. She looked at the smoking chains on the ground. Then she looked at me. I pumped the action of the rifle, cha-chunk. A spent shell casing pinged off the floor. I shifted my aim to the Varaxian leader. "You have 3 seconds to run," I told him. 1. He didn't wait for 2. He saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man who had been looking for an excuse to vent some frustration for a decade. He and his crew scrambled away into the shadows of the station. I walked over to Elara. She was paralyzed, staring at me like I was a monster who had forgotten how to be a monster. "Get up," I had said, extending a hand. "We're leaving." Back in the mess hall, the memory faded. I opened my eyes. Elara was still watching me, the protein block untouched. You aimed at me," she whispered. Her voice was scratchy, unused to speaking. It was melodic, even in fear. "I aimed at the chain," I corrected her. "I don't miss." "You could have missed. A millimeter to the left?" "I don't miss," I repeated, firmer this time. "Not when it matters." She slowly uncurled her legs, lowering her feet to the floor. She took the spoon and poked at the food. "Why?" "Why what? Why did you not leave me?" I am broken. I am of no use. The masters said I was damaged goods." I snorted. "Masters? Thugs in cheap leather." I took another sip of coffee. "And as for damaged, look around you, kid." I swept my hand around the room. "Look at this ship. Look at that bulkhead over there. You see that weld mark? That's from a pirate raid in the Nebula of Tears. See that flickering light? Wiring issue I can't seem to track down. The engine vibrates, the air smells like burnt toast, and the navigation computer has a personality disorder." I leaned forward. "This ship is damaged." "I'm damaged," I tapped the scar on my face. "Got this on a moon you've never heard of, fighting a war that nobody remembers. By your logic, we're all trash. We should all be scrapped." Elara looked at the weld mark. Then she looked at my scar. "But this ship flies," she said softly. "Damn right she flies," I said. "She flies because she's stubborn. And because I don't give up on her. Value isn't about being shiny and new, Elara. Value is about whether you're willing to keep going." Elara. I had used the name in my head, but she caught the tone. "My name is not Kid," she said. She sat up a little straighter. A tiny spark of dignity buried deep under the trauma flared up. "I am Elara Valcorin, daughter of the Sapphire Spire." "Well, Elara Valcorin," I said, offering a small, dry smile. "I'm Ronin, just Ronin, and on this ship nobody is trash. Now eat, that's an order." She hesitated for 1 second more, then began to eat, ravenously. She shoveled the food into her mouth, her hands shaking, the primal need for fuel taking over. I watched her, feeling that familiar weight in my chest. It was the weight of responsibility. I had done the stupid thing. I had saved the girl. Now I had to keep her alive. And in this sector, That was the hardest job in the universe. Suddenly the ship's lights turned red. A low pulsing siren began to wail throughout the hull. Whoop, whoop. Whoop. Elara dropped her spoon. The fear washed back over her face instantly, drowning out that tiny spark of dignity. She scrambled backward, hitting the wall. "They found us," she shrieked. "I told you, the Black Sun. They have trackers." "I cut your tracker out," I said calmly, standing up. "This isn't a tracker." I walked to the wall intercom and slapped the button. Computer status report. The ship's AI, a voice that sounded like a bored librarian, crackled to life. Proximity alert. 3 vessels dropping out of slip space. Signatures match Syndicate interceptor class. Weapons hot. Hailing frequency active. Put it on speakers. A voice filled the mess hall. It wasn't the lizard from the dock, it was something worse. It was a voice like grinding glass, smooth, cold, and utterly devoid of mercy. "Attention, Terran vessel Iron Mule. You are in possession of stolen property. The highborn female is ours. You have 10 seconds to power down your shields and prepare for boarding. If you comply, we will only kill you. If you resist, we will make you watch what we do to her first." Elara was hyperventilating. She grabbed her hair, pulling at it. No, Ronin, you have to give me to them. You have to." She lunged for the door. "I will go to the airlock." "I won't let them take you." I moved faster than a man my age should move. I stepped in front of her, blocking the doorway. I was a wall of silver armor and grim determination. "Get out of my way!" she cried, pounding her small fists against my chest plating. It didn't even make a sound. "They will burn you alive. They are 3 ships. You are 1 old man in a garbage can." I caught her wrists gently but firmly. I held them until she stopped struggling, until she looked up at me with tears streaming down her face. "Listen to me," I said. My voice was low, vibrating through the armor. "I am not just an old man, and this is not just a garbage can." I let go of her wrists and pointed toward the cockpit. "I'm a soldier. This is my fortress, and nobody takes my crew." "Crew?" She stared at me, confused. "I am not crew." "I am." "You're on the ship," I said, turning and walking toward the bridge. "That makes you crew, and I don't leave crew behind." I paused at the threshold of the cockpit. The red emergency lights bathed the corridor in the color of blood. "Elara," I called back. She looked at me, trembling. "Come to the bridge, strap in." "Why?" she sobbed. "We are going to die." I cracked my knuckles. The sound was like pistol shots in the hallway. "Maybe," I said, "but I'm going to make sure it's the most expensive victory they ever bought." I walked into the cockpit and slid into the pilot's seat. The sensor board was lit up like a Christmas tree. 3 red dots, fast movers. Killers. I flipped the master arm switch for the weapon systems. The old kinetic cannons thumped as they loaded heavy rounds into the chambers. Elara appeared at the door. She looked terrified, small and hopeless, but she walked in. She sat in the co-pilot's chair and pulled the safety harness over her chest with shaking hands. "Computer," I said, "play playlist, Last Stand." The speakers crackled. A heavy, distorted electric guitar riff began to play. Old earth metal. "Slow, angry, and relentless. What is this noise?" Elara asked, her voice quivering. "This?" I grabbed the throttle, feeling the vibration of the engines waking up under my palm. "This is the sound of an old man refusing to behave." I pushed the throttle forward. The Iron Mule roared. "Hang on, Elara. It's about to get bumpy." The first impact hit us like a god's fist. The Iron Mule didn't just shake, she screamed. It was a terrifying metallic shriek of durasteel plates grinding against each other as a plasma torpedo slammed into our starboard shield emitter. The cockpit lights flickered from red to black, then back to an angry, pulsing crimson. "Shields down to 60%. Elara screamed, her hands gripping the armrest so hard I thought she might snap the metal. "They are too fast, Ronin. They are circling us like razor bats." I wrestled with the yoke. It felt like trying to steer a falling building. The heavy metal music was still blaring, a thumping bass line that matched the pounding of my own heart. But the sound of the battle was louder. "Let them circle," I grunted, sweat stinging my eyes. "They want to play with their food. They want to scare us." I watched the tactical display. The 3 red dots were weaving in and out, taking pot shots at my engines. They were fast, sleek, and annoying, high-tech Syndicate garbage. They relied on speed and energy shielding. I relied on mass. "Hang on," I yelled. I didn't try to turn with them. That's a rookie mistake. You don't dogfight a mosquito in a dump truck. You wait for the mosquito to land. I pulled the throttle back to 0. Then I fired the reverse thrusters at full burn. The mule shuddered violently as 70 years of momentum fought against the sudden braking force. We stopped dead in the void. The lead interceptor, expecting me to bank left, overshot. He flew right across my nose. "Gotcha," I whispered. My fingers squeezed the trigger studs. Thump, 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 the kinetic cannons roared. These weren't elegant lasers that cauterized the wound. These were 30-pound slugs of depleted uranium. They tore through the vacuum and smashed into the interceptor's rear engine block. There was no fireball. In space, fire needs oxygen. There was just a brutal cloud of debris as the enemy ship's engine disintegrated. It spun away, tumbling out of control into the dark. "One down!" I shouted, a savage grin breaking across my face. "Two left," Elara cried. She wasn't celebrating. She was staring at the sensor screen with horror. They are splitting up. One high, one low. "Pincer maneuver," I muttered. "Classic." Suddenly, the sensor screen went white. Static filled the display. The red dots vanished. "I lost them," Elara yelled, tapping frantically on the glass. "The sensors are dead. They are jamming us." "Smart," I said, wiping blood from a cut above my eye. "They blinded us. Now they're going to come in for the kill shot from our blind spots." I looked out the viewport. Nothing but stars and darkness. I couldn't see them, I couldn't track them. And in a ship this heavy, if you don't see the hit coming, you can't roll with the punch. I looked at Elara. She was hyperventilating again, her chest heaving. "Elara!" I barked. She looked at me, eyes wide. "You said you're highborn, right?" Yes. "What does that matter?" "Your ears." I pointed at her long, elegant ears. "I've heard stories. You people can hear a pin drop in a sandstorm. You can sense vibration frequencies that humans can't even dream of." I can, but the hull!" I shouted as another glancing hit rocked the ship. "The hull is a giant tuning fork. When their engines get close, they vibrate the metal. Close your eyes, listen to the ship." "I can't. It's too loud. The music, the alarms." I reached out and slammed the master audio switch. The music cut out, the alarms were silenced. The cockpit fell into a heavy, terrifying quiet, broken only by the groaning of the ship's frame. "Close your eyes," I ordered, my voice low and intense. "Don't look for them, feel them. Tell me where they are." Elara stared at me for a split second. She saw the desperation in my eyes, but also the trust. I was betting my life, our lives, on her biology, on her value. She squeezed her eyes shut. Her ears twitched, swiveling slightly. She took a deep, shaky breath. I waited. My hands hovered over the maneuvering thrusters. If she was wrong, we were dead. For 3 seconds, there was nothing. Then her eyes snapped open. They weren't fearful anymore, they were focused. "Port side!" she screamed. "Below us, coming up fast." I didn't hesitate. I slammed the yoke hard to the right, rolling the ship onto its side. A split second later, a stream of green plasma fire erupted right where we had been. If I hadn't moved, it would have cored the reactor. "Starboard!" she yelled again, pointing. "The other one is diving." I kicked the rudder pedal, swinging the nose down. Thump thump, my cannons barked. I caught the second ship in a glancing blow, shredding its wing. It veered off, leaking atmosphere. "You did it," I laughed. It was a manic, adrenaline-fueled sound. "You're a natural." But the celebration was short-lived. A warning light on the dash turned from red to flashing white. The temperature gauge for the main reactor was redlining. "Ronin," Elara said, her voice dropping. "The reactor, it is overheating." "I know," I grimaced. "We took a hit to the coolant lines on that first pass. We're bleeding coolant. If it goes critical, we go supernova," I finished. "And the last ship, the leader, he knows it." I looked at the long-range scan. The leader's ship, the one with the jagged voice, was holding position just out of range. He wasn't attacking, he was watching. He saw the venting gas. He knew I was bleeding out. The comms crackled to life again. "You fight well for a dying animal," the voice sneered. "But it is over, your core is unstable. Eject the girl in an escape pod and I will let you burn in peace. Or I can finish you now." I looked at the temperature gauge. 8%. We had maybe 60 seconds before the safeties kicked in and shut down the engines completely. Then we would be a floating coffin. I looked at Elara. She was unbuckling her harness. "No," I said. "He is right," she said softly. She wasn't crying anymore, she looked calm. "You cannot save the ship and me. If I go to him, maybe you live." "Sit down," I growled. "Ronin, please be logical. There is no tactical move left." "There's always a move," I said, staring at the enemy ship on the screen. "It's just stupid." "Stupid." "Insane," I corrected. Elara, how much do you trust me? She looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the sweat on my face, the gray stubble, the stubborn set of my jaw. She saw the man who had shot her chains when she expected a bullet. With my life, she whispered. Good. Because I'm going to need you to do something crazy. I pointed to the manual release lever for the reactor coolant reserve. On my mark, I want you to dump the remaining coolant. All of it. That will kill the engines. We will stall. Not immediately. It will create a massive superheated cloud of white gas behind us. A smokescreen. And then we run? No. I smiled, and it was the smile of a predator. We don't run. I'm going to flip the ship 180 degrees. And we're going to charge through the cloud. Charge in at him? He thinks we're dying. He thinks we're blind. He won't expect 1,000 tons of angry iron to come flying out of the smoke at ramming speed. Elara's mouth fell open. You are going to ram him? I'm going to introduce him to the Iron Mule, I said. Hand on the lever, Elara. We have one shot. She reached out. Her blue hand gripped the lever. She was trembling, but she didn't let go. Ready, she said. 3, I counted down. 2, 1, mark, she yanked the lever. A massive whoosh shuddered through the frame. On the rear monitor, I saw a blinding white cloud of gas explode outward, completely obscuring us from view. Holding breath, I shouted. I slammed the thrusters. I spun the ship around, facing into our own smoke, facing the enemy. Here comes the pain. I punched the afterburners. The engines screamed in protest, burning the last dregs of fuel before the heat death. We rocketed into the white fog. Blind, we were flying blind again. Brace for impact, I roared. Elara curled into a ball in her seat. I locked my arms, aiming for where I knew the enemy was. For 3 seconds, there was only white. Then, we punched through the cloud like a bullet through a ghost. The Syndicate ship was right there. He hadn't moved. He was sitting still, waiting for us to explode. He filled the entire viewport. I saw the pilot in the other cockpit. I saw his lizard eyes go wide. He tried to bank, too late. Crunch. It wasn't a clean sound. It was the sound of metal tearing metal. The Iron Mule's reinforced nose plow, designed for pushing asteroids, slammed into the interceptor's port wing and engine block. The impact threw me forward against my harness so hard the air left my lungs. Sparks showered the bridge like fireworks. The sound of tearing metal was deafening. We sheared his wing off completely. The interceptor spun violently, careening out of control. Its reactor going critical. I fought the controls, trying to stabilize. Engines offline, Elara screamed. Reactor shut down. Let her drift, I gasped. Behind us, a bright blue flash lit up the void. The Syndicate leader's ship had exploded. Then silence. The engines died. The humming stopped. The lights settled into a dim, amber emergency glow. We were drifting, battered, broken, leaking atmosphere, but we were alone. I sat there for a long time, just listening to the sound of my own heartbeat and the cooling tick-tick-tick of the dashboard. My hands were shaking. I couldn't stop them. I slowly turned my head to look at Elara. She was staring at the empty space where the enemy used to be. Then she turned to me. Her hair was a mess, her face smeared with grease, but her eyes were shining. We are alive, she whispered. It was a question. Yeah, I wheezed, unbuckling my harness with a groan. We're alive, somehow. You rammed him. Told you, I said, trying to stand up and failing. I sat back down. I don't leave things unfinished. Elara unbuckled her belt. She stood up. She looked different now. Taller. The scared girl from the loading dock was gone. In her place was someone who had stared death in the face and helped punch it in the nose. She walked over to me. She hesitated, then reached out and placed a cool hand on my armored shoulder. You are insane, she said. But there was no fear in the word. Only awe. Occupational hazard, I grinned weakly. You did good, kid, with the ears. I couldn't have done it without you. She looked down at her hands, the hands she had thought were useless. I helped. Helped? You saved our skins. That makes you crewed official. I pointed a shaky finger at the coffee machine in the corner of the bridge. Now, since we're alive and currently drifting in deep space, waiting for the backup generator to kick in, do you think you can fix the coffee maker? Because I'm going to need a cup. Elara laughed. It was a beautiful, clear sound that seemed to chase away the shadows in the cockpit. I can try, she said. But only if you promise never to play that terrible music again. No promises, I winked. Driver picks the music. She walked over to the machine, humming softly. I leaned back in my chair, watching the stars drift by. My ship was a wreck. I was broke. I had the Black Sun Syndicate probably putting a bounty on my head as we spoke, but as I watched Elara working on the coffee machine looking for a screwdriver, I realized something. For the last 10 years, the Iron Mule had been a lonely place. It was just me and the ghosts of my past. Now it felt like a home. I wish you could have seen the look on her face when she realized she wasn't a prisoner, or a piece of cargo, or a victim anymore. It's the kind of look that makes 45 years of bad coffee and bruised ribs worth it. It's the look of someone who just found out that even in the darkest part of the galaxy, the chains can break. "Hey Ronin," she called out. "I think I found some cinnamon." I smiled. "You're hired."